one time Prabhupada gave me a laddu. I think I told this story last time, yeah. A luglu, actually. It wasn't a laddu, it was a luglu, as Prabhupada called them. Anyway, and he asked me what my impression of it was, you know, and I tasted it, and I just couldn't believe the taste. I said, "It's not of this world." Prabhupada said, "You're right." He said, this is the same recipe that Mother Yasoda cooks for Krishna when he goes out to tend the cows, and Krishna likes them so much that he keeps extra in his pockets so that he can eat them throughout the day. You know, and when Prabhupada was speaking, it was very clear to me that it was Mother Yasoda's recipe, and Prabhupada knew it very well.
I remember they used to say, there's only one question you should ask the spiritual master, and that's, how may I serve you? And I figured, well, I already knew how I was supposed to serve him, distributing books, taking care of the temple, cleaning, cooking. There was like, what do I need to ask him? How may I serve you? So, but when I was in Chicago, I had been on Guru Kripa's party, and they used to do Ganesh worship. So I came back, and I was doing I wanted to do Ganesh worship, and I told all the Sankirtan devotees, they're collecting so much money there by doing Ganesh puja, right? And so the devotees all got into it. The temple president found out about it, told us we had to stop. We didn't listen to him. They got the GBC involved. We said, oh, who's the GBC? He doesn't know anything. The Swamis are doing it. So that was like the first question I asked Srila Prabhupada was, could I do Ganesh puja? And I didn't mention anything about money. I just mentioned it says in the Nectar Devotion that you should worship Ganesh, you know, and things like that. And this is how the mantras they used and stuff. And could we do that? And then Prabhupada wrote back, you know, my dear sons, because all the Sankirtan devotees signed it. So Prabhupada wrote back, my dear sons, you know, please accept my blessings. And I remember when we were sitting around reading it, we were all like, that's it, our lives are perfect. Prabhupada's given us his blessings. And then as we read further, Prabhupada was talking about how Krishna says just to worship him, and you're proposing to worship a demigod. Why is this? Krishna says you're less intelligent if you do this, right? And we wouldn't have taken that from anyone. But we were just in ecstasy. Prabhupada told us that. And then Prabhupada went on to say, but still if you're attached to worshiping Ganesh, and it's I got the letter, and it says, and it says, for huge amounts of Lakshmi, and then penciled in, to serve Krishna, then you please send me $100,000 a month and not a single farthing less. So I thought that was a very nice instruction, and we were all like, we stopped our Ganesh puja and went out on Sankirtan, and nobody else could have told us that. But Prabhupada told us that, and we were in ecstasy.
Parikit said to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, should we attend classes? Because what was happening at that time was Bharadwaj was taking the artists over to the Los Angeles County Art Museum, and we were studying the art and making sketches and so on and so forth, and he was giving us sketching classes and so on and so forth. Srila Prabhupada said, yes. And Parikit said, but I mean, and Srila Prabhupada said, yes, morning and evening classes, and Parikit interrupted him and said, but I mean, and Srila Prabhupada interrupted him and said, but I mean morning and evening classes. And then at that time he said, by your attending these classes, then you will please the Lord from within your heart, and you will receive instructions from within as Paramatma.
I was with Prabhupada when we made some of the recordings. He made some of the recordings, which are, we listened to bhajans. And it was quite wonderful to watch Prabhupada record. First, he would play the harmonium. And, well, when I was there, I'd play the kartals, or if I wasn't there, someone else would, very gently. And try to keep the rhythm, because there was no mridanga. Because after he would record the harmonium and the kartals, then he would put on the headphones, and he would listen to the recording and just play the mridanga to accompany himself. So a lot of these tapes are Prabhupada playing harmonium and mridanga. And Prabhupada was an expert musician. I heard that, I think it's mentioned in perhaps in the Lamrita, but anyway, it said that when the recording engineer heard the chanting that Prabhupada did on the Happening album, first Hare Krishna album, the man said it was, Prabhupada was uncanny, that where Prabhupada was had perfect pitch. Perfect pitch. When the recording engineer was very, very impressed with Prabhupada's voice.
And I had heard another time, Prabhupada had a unique ability to do that, to chastise people or, point out your folly or, your lowness or whatever. And because it came from Prabhupada and the way he said it, you didn't take any offense. You just felt like, oh, okay. And they said one time Prabhupada was walking in Hawaii, and he had said this before, that because the people ate so many pigs, they were looking like pigs. And they were walking by some Hawaiians when they said it. And the people heard it. And so they were like, they wanted to talk to Prabhupada about that. And then Prabhupada started talking to them about how they're the soul and they're not their body. And as he was talking to them, they were happy. And they walked away and they realized Prabhupada wasn't making an offense about them. They were totally enveloped in Prabhupada's love and his spiritual instruction that you're not the body, and this is just, the bodies look different. Different people, you have different kinds of bodies. And they walked away quite happy. They weren't all offended, and we were thinking, only Prabhupada can do things like this. And we said anything like that, it'd be a riot.
Just a few months after I took sannyas, I was in Los Angeles with Prabhupada and staying underneath his quarters in a sort of small room without windows that was in those days reserved for the sannyasis. And I remember at that particular time, for a few days I was feeling actually discouraged because I was thinking that I'm not a very good devotee. How will I ever become a good devotee? And I was just sort of feeling a little morose like that. How will I ever come to the proper standard of serving Prabhupada? So I was in that mood, and every day Prabhupada would come down the stairs to go out to the garden. He would, the Los Angeles Temple, New Dwarka, he would come down the stairs and then walk straight to the back there of the building and then along that little walkway to his garden. So this day that I was feeling somewhat morose, Prabhupada, without saying a word, simply came by my room, opened the door, came in the room. Of course, I immediately offered obeisance. I just walked in, looked around like this, and then continued his way. So I understood that he was calling me. So I immediately got up and ran behind him, without saying a word. So I walked behind Prabhupada out to the garden. And actually that day we were just alone. His servant, of course, walked with him out to the garden, somehow went to do something, and because I was there. And so I just sat there alone with Prabhupada. Again, I had been in that mood of being somewhat discouraged, and so Prabhupada began to preach to me in a very sweet, gentle way. And what was unique about this preaching is, he was lifting my spirits, that he would never say Krishna or God. He kept saying the Father. Mm. And of course, he was also the Father, but he simply began saying that actually the Father wants you to be happy. Mm. And what does the Father want? He simply wants to see that you're happy, but you have to also serve the Father. And he began preaching for about 15 minutes, only using the word the Father. And it was a very compassionate, of course, completely entered my heart and lifted me out of all these doldrums. And I became, again, very enthusiastic. It was very kind preaching. And so for the next few days, every day, because I was sort of trying to practice the principle of not trying to enjoy the guru. So I would just stay in my room, and every day in the afternoon on his way out to the garden, he would walk in, again, just walk into my room, just right through the door, and just sort of look around, and turn on his heels and walk out. And every day I would run behind him. Mm.
One time he actually, as far as I remember, he said it both times he was in Hawaii. He talked about the surfers. And he would go, you say surfer, I say sufferer. And every devotee was a surfer. Tell me, Prabhupada looked right at him when he said it. And which I kind of got a kick out of, because I was thinking, well, how many surfers there were? And they all say it. Prabhupada was looking right at him when he said that. You say surfer, I say sufferer.